Hello, it's Jim from JetsonX.com. In today's little software challenge, I'm going to refactor and streamline Python code that I wrote about a month ago. The code is a GUI for inspecting GStreamer plugins, elements, and types. It's based on the GST Inspect command line tool. You will find that doing these little challenges on your own code will help improve your understanding of programming methods. Over time, you will also learn to recognize the typical problem areas in your own coding style. You should create these little challenges for yourself to help with your time estimating skills. On a pad of paper, write down today's date. We're going to build a list of tasks. Your first task is to get a feel for what to refactor and change. Write this down as the first item in the list and estimate how long this will take. Go through the code and grok it, and then write down in a list form each programming task that you will need to perform. Once you have written down everything you want to change, compare how long this process took to your estimated time. Now for each one of the tasks in the list, estimate how long it will take to implement and test. Then you're ready to start coding. No distractions, turn off the phone, no email, web browsing, and so on. You want to time each one of the tasks as you program them. Once you complete a task, cross it off your list and write down how long it took for you to complete it. Rinse and repeat until you are done. You will now be able to make a good comparison between your estimates and actual times. This will give you a better feel for how close your task description matches what you ended up doing. It will also help sharpen your time estimation. You will find these to be valuable skills. Let's get started. The original code is in the folder sketch-1. The modified code is here in main. There are two paths you can go by with the help of this video. First way is to just follow along with me and then attempt it on your own. In the second path, you can modify the code without seeing what I did and later compare. Let's get started. On the JetsonX account on GitHub, there is a repository named GST-Explorer. Let's clone that repository. And open up a file browser. The code that we are going to work on is in sketch-1. Let's make a copy of that. Let's rename it to something creative like sketch-2. Now let's close this up and open up Visual Studio Code. Let's open the folder we just created. Okay. And here's our code. We will be using the extensions here for Python and Qt for Python. Qt is the GUI framework that we are using. Let's run our program to make sure it works. I'm going to run in debug mode. And here's our GStreamer Inspector. I wrote this when I was working on some deep stream projects. This allows me to do a couple of different things. I can look at the elements. I can look at their properties and their paths. Their templates, their sinks and their sources. I can categorize them a little bit here. Types, for example. Here are all our audio types. Gives you a little bit of information. Tells you which plugin they are contained in. You can also look at the plugins, and I have a filter for searching. So if I look at core elements, I can see the plugin details. Here are all the elements that are located inside the plugin. It's very much like GST Inspect. So for example, we have 1,309 items that we can look at. I can filter that by the NVIDIA prefix. NV-infer, for example. Here's all the element properties. Pretty handy dandy. Let's close this up. Now this was a little sketch I wrote. It took me about 3 hours to write this program. Because this is a GUI program, I decided to use a model view controller design pattern. You can think of a model as the data and its relationships. The view is kind of what you see on the screen, and the controller coordinates the view and the data. And this is a typical mess after the first run through. So today, let's clean that up. I did a quick look through the code here. We're going to do a little bit of refactoring, and then there are some code smells that we need to go take a look at. Our first fix of the day. The name of this file is a little long. Let's rename this file. A little bit more simply, gst_model. Python wants to make refactoring changes. Okay. Ha! One down. Another one I wanted to do. This file is pretty long. We'll put our controller in a different file. Let's grab it. Add a file. Paste that in. Oh, problems. Bunch of problems. GST list type. It looks like we need to import some things. So I know that's in the model. Let's go get that. Impressive. We got rid of 10 problems. Q abstract item view. That's part of Qt. I happen to know that. Fixed one. Qt is not defined. Okay. Oh, we're down to 3. Okay, so RE is not defined. That's regular expressions that we use in our search terms. Then QList item. QList widget item. Let's add that in. No problems detected. Okay, so that's good. Let's wander back over to our inspector. We'll be brave and delete this. Gone. Let's add our controller back in. We'll import that. GST inspector controller. Any problems? No problems. Okay, let's take it for a run. That's a good sign. Elements, plugins. That works. Types. All. Search. That works. So that's good. Let's hit this up and format our document. We'll format this one too while we are at it. And now we are ready to start looking for some smelly code. I happen to know that there's a lot over here in the model. So let's clean this up and make it more Pythonic. We probably want this to be an int flag, which is a type of enum. And by convention, we would want to use these as uppercase. The type here seems rather redundant, so let's rename this one. We will call it none. We'll call this one plugin. We'll rename the rest of them here.
Etc., etc., etc.
Let's import that. Get rid of that one. Make sure it still works. We need to go over to the inspector. Run that baby. Looks like we're good to go. Get rid of this one. Get rid of that one. Back to our model. This looks a little smelly right here. We'll come back to that in a little while. Let's see what these are. Okay, this is where we call GST inspect. We run this command and it returns the results into memory. This is pretty verbose. It's a little bit more flexible than the way that we actually use it. So let's try something a little bit different. Go to return. Okay, we are going to call GST inspect, and then we are going to return it. If it fails, we get an exception. The way I usually program this is I have a return variable, and then I always return the return variable. It makes it easier to debug. So this is pretty bad form here. Usually we would want to catch the exception and do some processing on it. Yeah, a simple sketch like this, I didn't do too much. However, we should probably say something at least. Let's say accept exception as E. And we'll just print it. For a real program, of course, you'd figure out how to handle the exception correctly. And you wouldn't name it just E. Let's name it something else. Characters are not that expensive. So what it does is it calls GST inspect and returns the result. Format our document. So let's run it and see what happens. A bytes-like object is required, not a string. That sounds bad. What is line? Line is a byte array. Now I want it to be a string. Okay, so that's something that's different now. Let's stop all this nonsense. Oops, hit that. Let's put an encoding on it. Tell it that I want a string. Coding equals UTF, something like that. Let's run it again. That's good. Let's see, plugins, everything works, hopefully. Let's do the same to these other two.
Etc., etc., etc.
And let's test it out. It looks like that all took. That's a good deal. So we can cross that off our list. A little bit cleaner. Let's take a look at the next method, parse plugin element text. Okay, let's look at this method, parse plugin element. Okay, if the line is blank, I skip, and if it's this total count, colon, then I skip over that too. So I can see the last line there was a skip and then the total count. So when I just run gst-inspect-1.0, those are the results. And in general, this looks like this, which is the plugin, the element name, and then a short description. And we have some spaces in between these things. We'll have to take care of that. So let's take care of this little mess here. It's not particularly bad, but it's not good either.
What is the meaning of this, monsieur?
For each line, we split the line by the colon. The plugin name is the first entry, and then we do lstrip, which will delete preceding white space. And we put those into variables. So let's do that a little bit differently. Let's do this by a list comprehension. And then we'll do a list deconstruction. Let's comment this out. See if I can get away with this. Let's try running this baby. Too many values to unpack. Okay, what's split line? Oh, it's a GUI. So it has two descriptions. Okay, now let's see what we can do about that. Let's put a star here. This will take whatever remains after the first two and turn that into a list in and of itself. And that's going to cause us a little bit of trouble. So I'll just take the first one. Otherwise, it's just a blank string. Let's restart it. Okay, we're happening. Huh. Looks like that works. Get rid of all this. You can decide for yourself which is easier to look at. This is a little less code, but it's more Python-y. Let's take our comment and keep that. It is just a sketch after all. And get rid of this. And the naming's just terrible in all this. I need to go back and fix that too. Okay, well, let's look at this, the plugin dictionary. What in the world is it trying to do?
What is the meaning of this, monsieur?
Let's run this. You can see that there are plugins, which are denoted by this strange little icon, that have the same name as elements. So here's the plugin details. This is the element that it contains. But there's also an element here, and that contains the properties, the pads, the pad templates, and all that. So I think the idea was, if we look at a plugin, this one has a lot of elements. We would keep a dictionary of this particular item, and it would have all of these elements associated with it. But that's not the way it's used in our application. It's just a list of plugins. Let's get a better match here. The other thing that it's doing is it does not want duplicate entries. But if we're going to keep a list without duplicate entries, that's just a set in Python. So we'll change this to a set. And notice the other sin here. We have this plugin element, and we are using it to gain access to this variable, which is fine if we had done that throughout the rest of the method. But we didn't, so you want it to be consistent. So let's fix all that nonsense. Hop back up here. And I'll get rid of that. Find all of our plugin dictionaries. Gone. Next. We just add in the plugin list. When we add to a set, if it's a duplicate, it ignores it. Okay, so those are all gone. I would guess that the controller must have the plugin dictionary when it tries to build the list. Let's go look over there. Here they are. Get rid of that. Let's test it out. And I meant model. Stop that. Try it again. And all of our plugins are here. Okay, cross that one off the list. Go back to our model again. What else do we have here? And this isn't very readable. We basically look for this string in the element or type name, and we skip those. We could put these strings in a list and then do a list comprehension against this element or type name. That's 6 of one, half dozen the other. Now I have two different dictionaries, one for the elements and one for the type factories. The only thing that appears to be different is their type. Let's work on combining the two. Let's hop up here. Dictionary of features, and that's elements and type. comment this out. This promises to be a little painful. Now in our plugin element, we will add a type. And let's call that a GST list type. Well, let's fix this up. The slash indicates that it is a type. Otherwise, we will assume that it is an element. And we will add it to our feature dictionary. Let's comment that out. Okay, let's go over to the GST controller. Let's do this a little bit more Python-y for key and forgot the semicolon. That should be that. Let's comment this out. Let's run it. Of course it doesn't. I removed those. What are you thinking? Think with me on this one. Restart it. Ha! You think you're so smart. Oh, that looks a sight better. Looks like it still works. Get rid of this nonsense. The model looks like it's pretty well cleaned up. The names are terrible. So we need to fix the names. Take a look at the controller. Let's get rid of this. That was rather ugly. Format the document. Let's take a look at the view here. This is a little disconcerting. So we know that when we instantiate everything, we're going to basically create a controller. So that's why we have the controller here, and we know that we want to associate the model with the controller. So if we go down and look at main, we can see that we called model here, GST Inspector view here. So we associate the model and the view right here in our main definition. Now, of course, you could do this a little bit differently and reference this in the GST Inspector controller class, but this is okay. But when we look here, add list item, and it has a glist type.
What is the meaning of this, monsieur?
We don't want our view to know anything about our model. So, this probably belongs in the controller. The reason it gets a little bit mixed up is that most of these user interface frameworks kind of mix the controller and the view. So let's rip this out. And put it inside the controller. You can see where we populate the list widget here. It's no longer in the view, it's in this class. Get rid of that. And we're missing Q icon. We import that. Let's rip this out. It looks like that worked. Cross that off the list. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Most of this code is just setting up the GUI. Quick view through the controller. It's not nearly as smelly as it was. There's no direct Python enumerator to go through the list widgets. Okay, so we're back in the model. And like I said, I really disliked some of the namings here. If you just would have named them right the first time. Let's rename this feature name. And this is a plugin name.
Etc., etc., etc.
Instead of calling them elements, we'll call them features. Hopefully our little IDE knew what to do. Let's rename this also. Let's try running it. See if all this took. No. Try it again. Always good to see. So it looks like it's up and running. Everything's pretty happy. May clean it up further going forward, but that's kind of how you go about taking dirty, nasty, ugly code and making it beautiful. Well, not beautiful. Still needs some work. But it's a good sketch. It's like almost any other creative endeavor. You just keep iterating through until you get rid of the bad parts and keep most of the good parts. And try to get rid of the bugs before you put it out in the world. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you have not already, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Oh, and be safe.